as a director, you need to keep the whole story clearly in your head. It never turns out that the schedule is how you would want it to be. And in this case, it was absolutely the opposite of what I could have ordered up myself.
So I gotta say, Fast Charlie is such a fun movie. It's fast paced. It's slick. I love Pierce in the role. What about this project initially sparked your interest to want to be a part of it?
Okay, so what first attracted me to Fast Charlie was the chance to work with Richard Wenk, a screenwriter that I've admired for a long time. We've tried to work together over the years, couldn't find anything. And the producer brought me the novel by Victor Giesler. And I said, okay, yeah, get Richard Wenk and I'm in. And so he did. And Richard transferred the story from southern Florida and Miami to the Mississippi Delta and New Orleans, and sort of took the characters and placed them, and told the same story with the same characters, but with much more, even than the original, much more charm, much more of a sense of yearning, much more romance, and much more humor even than the original novel. So yeah, that's what got me in. The story, the initial story, and then the chance to work with a great screenwriter.
I love that. I mean, it really does feel so energetic just in its writing alone, let alone the cast and the direction that you bring to it. Which, speaking of, I mean, this is a movie who lives and dies on Charlie as much as it does the writing. And I'm curious, what that search was like for you, finding the right person to lead this cast.
Pierce was, I think, the only actor we went to. I mean, he seemed such a natural for this role, particularly as I remembered how well he played the hitman in Matador all those years ago, 20 years ago. It's bringing, the icy coldness of the James Bond character that he developed, and taking it sort of down to the bottom of the heap of criminality, but combining those two amazing qualities that Pierce has. He's also so suited for this part because he knows how to fire a gun, but he can also fire a more powerful missile just with the tip of an eyelid, sort of a look that, is like a bazooka firing. And he's so skilled at humor, his one-liners, his winks, his shoves, his little comments that he comes up with, some of which were improvised on set. He's really good at comedy. So he was the perfect choice and the only choice for this part.
I love that. And I love that you referenced The Matador, by the way. That is an underrated movie, in my opinion, from his filmography. And I can totally see parallels between that character and this character. Now, you mentioned the shift in location for the movie, and I'm curious what it was like, scouting for this, because it feels, the locations in this movie feel so rich and layered. Even something as simple as Morena's isolated home in the boonies. What was it like doing the scouting for this?
Well, first of all, I went to Orlando, and then took the journey that Charlie takes up to Miami. I stopped at a lot of seedy places along the way to sort of like get a feel for that. And then I went to Mississippi, to the Gulf Coast around Biloxi, and I sort of enveloped myself in that world there, which is different but the same, and then on to New Orleans. So, I don't know. I think that the story is just as cogent, just as strong between in those locations as it would have been still set in Florida. But the Gulf Coast also gave me a chance to find a unique place for Marcy, the character played by Morena Baccarin, to live. She's a woman who married young to a guy who turned out to be a low-level gangster, but not very good at that either, a loser gangster. So she fell in love with the wrong guy and found herself in a world that she's running away from. And so she's isolated herself, there on the coast, up on stilts, alone, a hermit almost, a hermit-like existence. So that seemed like the ideal shell for her to come out of, like a butterfly to find its wings. And that choice alone was something that we couldn't have found back in Florida. So yeah, I mean, for a director, the location hunt is easily the best part of making a movie, because everything's possible, including your imagination. There's no limitations on what you can achieve. And you play the movie out several times over. In each location, you imagine, where the characters are going to live. Like, for example, James Caan, who lives in a horse ranch. I must have chosen 7 different places before I ended up putting him in that location. And each one carried with it a story. So we make our movies more than once in our minds.
It's such a unique way to view filmmaking, as well as to view this story in particular. Now, you speaking of Morena, I mean, I love her in this role. I feel like we've seen it of her in similar roles in the past with things like Firefly and Deadpool even. What was it like, though, finding her for this role? Was she similar to Pierce, that she was the only one in your mind?
Quite the opposite, but she was our savior. We lost our actress just before shooting. We had a hiccup with the financing. We lost Marcy, and we started to film out of necessity. And it wasn't until day 7 that we found Morena to play the part. She came to New Orleans and stepped straight onto the set, which was quite unusual for me as a filmmaker. Usually you get your key cast, and they rehearse and they read and they do chemistry reads, and they have to feel good together. Well, Morena came in when we ran out of script that we could shoot with Pierce alone. We had to, if we were going to keep shooting, we had to have our Marcy, and she turned up just in time. But I was full of nerves, on that first day, as they read together for the first time. And they just seemed to hit it off, just like Marcy and Charlie in the movie. There's a certain reservation, a reserve sort of, I'll try and work you out, but quickly they're in quick step together, like a dancing couple on Dance with the Stars. They formed a very loving and trusting relationship that I think is quite magical for the audience who will watch this film.
Quite a fortunate turn of events for you then, and I agree. I think it's they play out that relationship very rewardingly. So with that said, though, I know that obviously most films don't get to film in chronological order due to locations or whatnot. But since she came on later in the shoot, were you able to shoot her and Charlie's scenes together in chronological order, or did that still have to be?
Absolutely not. We weren't. Completely out of order. The beginning was shot right at the end, and the end was shot right at the beginning. That's one of the wonderful merry-go-round roller coaster rides of filmmaking. That as a director, you need to keep the whole story clearly in your head, because it never turns out that the schedule is how you would want it to be. And in this case, it was absolutely the opposite of what I could have ordered up myself.
Well, then it's even more impressive that they clicked as well as quickly as they did, since they started from the end, went backwards essentially. What was it like then creating the look for this movie? Because I love that it has that sort of warmth of the South, but then also it has an elegance to it as well that feels very slick.
Yeah, well, that's the work of relatively unheralded, but very well known amongst cinematographers, DP, who shot the film. I'm talking about Warwick Thornton, an Indigenous Australian director, screenwriter, and cinematographer, who recently at the Camera Image Festival of Cinematography in Poland was voted by the other world's other best cinematographers as the best of 2023 for his film The New Boy, which premiered at Cannes in May, and starred Kate Blanchett. And Warwick is a master, and he brought his mastery to this film. So it has a beauty, an elegance, and a naturalism all at once.
I couldn't agree more. Was there any one scene maybe that when you heard his vision for it, he maybe had a different vision for it in mind than you did, but you loved his vision more?
He is such a subtle character. I mean, you hardly got a word out of him. I got more out of him at night than I did during the day, because we had a house that we rented together, and in New Orleans. And Warwick, like Charlie, is a chef. He would cook while I was watching my dailies, the film that I'd shot the day before. Warwick would be in the kitchen cooking up something wonderful for us to eat and talk about. But we wouldn't talk about the movie. We'd talk about the food, just like Charlie and Marcy. But to answer your question, was there one scene where I really appreciated his work? It was every scene where he was, as he always was, ready when the actors were ready. He never kept us waiting, and that's the beauty of working with an Australian DP. And I always try and use them. Chris Doyle, who worked with Wong Kar-wai, shot Rabbit Proof Fence, and Quite American. Don McAlpine shot the films with Harrison Ford, the Tom Clancy movies for me. Dean Semler shot the Bone Collector, he who won the Academy Award for Dances with Wolves, and who I'd worked with back in my 20s, making documentaries in Australia. Australian cinematographers go for something that's visually stunning, but they never forget the major priorities, which are story and character. And neither did Warwick. Always it's story and character. He never wanted to keep anyone waiting for him.
It shows so well throughout this movie, so I'm glad you were able to have that collaboration with him. For my final couple of questions before I let you go, you actually brought up one of them. I love your work on the Jack Ryan movies that you did. I think they're still some of my favorite for that property. And it's pretty amazing, though, that it came back with the John Krasinski series. And I'm curious, now that it's come to a close, did you get the chance to watch any of that? And if so, how did you feel?
No, I didn't. I couldn't. I just couldn't. I couldn't because for me, Harrison Ford is Jack Ryan, and no one else could be Jack Ryan. And I invested so much in that collaboration. It pulled me in because my dad worked in intelligence, in army intelligence in the Second World War. And I was brought up on his stories of training guerrilla fighters to be parachuted in behind the Japanese lines in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia. And, so the Jack Ryan films, were in a way a fulfillment of a desire to get closer to my own father, who had been a spy and an operative, just like Jack Ryan. Different era, different warfare, but so I didn't really. I watched the trailers for John's series, and they look great. But also, it was kind of a special thrill going with Harrison Ford to the CIA and having them open up to us in the way that they did, revealing the technology that's become part and parcel of modern warfare, satellite imagery and so on, when nobody knew about that stuff. And the CIA did it again for Angelina Jolie on Salt. She's playing a double agent, and they collected 8 female double agents and put them in a room in Langley. And we were sitting over at Paramount, and we're talking to them. Some were behind the camera and couldn't reveal their true identities. But it's hard for me to watch other people's spy movies because I was so steeped in the ones that I made.
I can totally respect that. And especially given you also have your personal connection to it as well as the other one. I see I am out of time, so I will go ahead and let you go. But Phillip, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I greatly appreciate it. I am a big admirer of your work, and I think Fast Charlie's a great addition to your filmography, and I look forward to spreading the word about it.
Thank you.